Imagine waking up to a news headline so disturbing that it sounds like something from a horror movie: a missing 2-year-old child, a murdered mother, a desperate police search, and then, a shocking discovery: an alligator swimming through a Florida lake carrying what investigators believed was evidence connected to the disappearance of a missing toddler. For a brief moment, the entire country wondered the same terrifying question: what happened to 2-year-old Taylen Mosley? Was this a tragic animal attack, or was something far more sinister hiding behind the headlines? As investigators dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a story involving family conflict, violence, unanswered questions, and a crime that would leave an entire community stunned. Today, we are examining the disturbing case of Taylen Mosley, the child whose disappearance led authorities to one of the most shocking discoveries in recent true crime history. This is a story that begins inside a quiet apartment in Florida and ends with a murder investigation that captured national attention. Let's begin. Before we discuss the investigation, it's important to understand who was involved. At the center of this story was 2-year-old Taylen Mosley. Friends and family described him as a happy child with a bright future ahead of him. His mother, Passion Jeffrey, was only 20 years old. Like many young parents, she was working hard to build a life for herself and her son. According to those who knew her, Passion was deeply devoted to Taylen. But behind the scenes, there were reportedly tensions involving Taylen's father, Thomas Mosley. While relationships often experience difficulties, nobody could have predicted the tragic events that would unfold during the final days of March 2023. At that point, life appeared normal from the outside. Yet investigators would later believe that something terrible was already taking shape. March 30, 2023, concern began growing when family members were unable to reach Passion Jeffrey. As hours passed without contact, alarm bells started ringing. Eventually, authorities were called to investigate. When officers arrived at the apartment complex in St. Petersburg, Florida, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside the residence, Passion Jeffrey was found dead. The scene immediately raised serious concerns. But another alarming detail quickly emerged. Her 2-year-old son, Taylen, was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, investigators weren't dealing with just one tragedy. They were dealing with a homicide investigation and a missing child case at the same time. Police launched an urgent search operation. Every minute mattered. Authorities feared the toddler could be in immediate danger. The community quickly became aware of the case. News outlets began reporting on the disappearance. Residents hoped Taylen would be found alive. Unfortunately, events would soon take an even darker turn. As investigators worked around the clock, they followed every possible lead. Search teams examined nearby areas. Witnesses were interviewed. Evidence was collected. Police attempted to reconstruct the timeline leading up to Passion's death and Taylen's disappearance. Questions continued to grow. Where was Taylen? Who had taken him? Was he still alive? Authorities focused significant attention on locating the child as quickly as possible. Then, during the search, officers received information that would lead them toward Lake Majori in St. Petersburg. Nobody knew it at the time, but this location would soon become the center of national attention. On March 31st, officers spotted an alligator in the lake. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary wildlife encounter. But then something unusual was observed. Investigators believed the animal was connected to evidence they were searching for. The alligator was captured by wildlife officials. What happened next shocked everyone involved. Authorities recovered the remains of Taylen Mosley. The news spread rapidly across the country. Headlines exploded across television broadcasts and social media platforms. People struggled to process what they were hearing. A missing toddler, a murdered mother, an alligator connected to the discovery. The details sounded almost unbelievable. Almost immediately, rumors began spreading online. Some people claimed the child had been eaten by the alligator. Others suggested the animal was responsible for his death. However, investigators would later make important clarifications. The evidence pointed in a very different direction. One of the biggest misconceptions surrounding this case involves the role of the alligator. Because of dramatic headlines, many people assumed Taylen died as a result of an alligator attack. Investigators did not present the case that way. Instead, authorities treated the case as a homicide investigation. The focus quickly shifted toward Thomas Mosley, Taylen's father. According to investigators, evidence suggested that both Passion Jeffrey and Taylen Mosley had been victims of violence before the Alligator was ever involved. This distinction is extremely important. The Alligator became part of the discovery of evidence. It was not considered the primary cause of the crime being investigated. As detectives pieced together events, they began constructing a timeline that painted a disturbing picture. Law enforcement soon focused attention on Thomas Mosley. Investigators alleged that he had been involved in the deaths of both Passion and Taylen. Authorities examined physical evidence, witness statements were reviewed. Digital records and timelines were analyzed. According to prosecutors, the evidence pointed toward a deliberate act of violence. As details emerged, the public reaction was intense. Many people struggled to understand how such a tragedy could occur. The case became one of the most discussed crime stories in the United States during that period. Television networks covered developments extensively. Online communities debated the evidence. Meanwhile, family members mourned the loss of both Passion and Taylen. For them, the media attention could never outweigh the devastating personal loss they had experienced. True crime cases capture attention for many reasons, but this case stood apart because of its unusual combination of circumstances. First, there was the murder of a young mother. Second, there was the disappearance of a toddler. Third, there was the extraordinary discovery involving an alligator. Together, these elements created a story that seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet beneath the shocking headlines was a much simpler reality. A young woman lost her life. A small child lost his life. And an entire family was left grieving. Sometimes sensational details dominate media coverage. But it's important to remember the human tragedy behind every headline. This case wasn't just a mystery. It was a devastating loss for everyone who knew the victims. Cases like this often force society to confront difficult questions. How can warning signs be identified earlier? What resources are available for families experiencing conflict? How can communities better support vulnerable individuals? While criminal investigations focus on accountability, broader conversations often emerge afterward. Every tragedy leaves lessons behind, and every victim deserves to be remembered as more than a headline. For many people, Taylen Mosley became known because of the shocking circumstances surrounding his discovery. But at the center of this story was a 2-year-old child whose life ended far too soon. More than anything, the case of Taylen Mosley serves as a reminder that the most disturbing crimes are often hidden behind ordinary appearances. What began as concern over an unresponsive mother soon evolved into a homicide investigation. That investigation led authorities to a lake. The lake led them to an alligator. And the alligator led them to evidence connected to one of the most heartbreaking cases of 2023. Even years later, many people still remember the shocking headlines. But behind those headlines were real lives, real families, and real grief. The story remains one of the most unusual and tragic criminal investigations in recent memory. If you found this documentary informative, make sure to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below.